In a hospital in Florence late at night, a 100-year-old man had just drawn his final breath. Beside him stood another man who did not weep. He was waiting for this moment, to carry out a forbidden act. The instant the dead man's heart stopped, he began dissecting the body in search of the secret of life, then hurriedly recorded his findings in a notebook filled with strange, reversed handwriting. That man was Leonardo da Vinci, and the forbidden notebook he was writing contained ideas that were 400 years ahead of humanity. To understand why Leonardo concealed his ideas, we must look back at a past that rejected him.
Leonardo was born in 1452 in the town of Vinci, an illegitimate child. In the rigid social structure of 15th century Italy, this was a stain that could not be washed away. Because he was a bastard, he was barred from attending the Latin schools where the elites were educated. He was denied the path of a notary, his father's profession. To make matters worse, he was left-handed. In the superstition of the time, the left hand was often associated with the devil, the sinister hand. From his very first breath, Leonardo was an outsider.
In a hospital in Florence late at night, a 100-year-old man had just drawn his final breath. Beside him stood another man who did not weep. He was waiting for this moment, to carry out a forbidden act. The instant the dead man's heart stopped, he began dissecting the body in search of the secret of life, then hurriedly recorded his findings in a notebook filled with strange, reversed handwriting. That man was Leonardo da Vinci, and the forbidden notebook he was writing contained ideas that were 400 years ahead of humanity. To understand why Leonardo concealed his ideas, we must look back at a past that rejected him.
In 15th century Florence, this was not merely a scandal, it was a capital crime. The penalty could include burning at the stake. For 2 months, Leonardo disappeared from the public record, likely imprisoned or under severe house arrest while the investigation proceeded. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, and likely the political influence of the Medici family, as one of the accused was connected to them, the trauma was absolute. He had stared into the face of a society that wanted to destroy him for who he was. The humiliation was public and devastating. It was after this moment that a shift occurred. The gregarious young artist began to retreat. He realized that his thoughts, his desires, and his observations were dangerous. If society could kill him for who he loved, what would they do to him for what he thought?
The notebook became his sanctuary. It was the one place where he could be his true self, unfiltered and uncensored. He began to write in mirror script, writing from right to left. While historians often attribute this to his left-handedness to avoid smudging the ink, the psychological implication is undeniable. It was a veil, a layer of encryption. It was a way to ensure that his thoughts remained his own. Inside these forbidden pages, Leonardo began a quest that would eventually lead him to that hospital room in Florence. He was obsessed with the human machine. At the time, anatomy was largely a theoretical subject, taught from ancient texts by Galen that were over 1,000 years old and often incorrect, based on animal dissections. The Church held strict views on the sanctity of the human body. To cut open the dead was to tamper with the vessel of the soul. Leonardo didn't care. He needed to know.
Over his lifetime, he dissected more than 30 corpses. He worked often at night, by candlelight, fighting the smell of decay and the fear of infection. What he found contradicted centuries of accepted knowledge. In his notebooks, he drew the human fetus in the womb. Before Leonardo, the fetus was often depicted as a fully formed miniature adult. Leonardo drew it as it was, a nut inside a shell, a biological miracle dependent on the mother. He mapped the spine with the precision of an engineer. He injected hot wax into the brain of an ox to model the shape of the ventricles, creating the first known cast of internal organs, a technique that wouldn't be replicated for centuries.
But his most dangerous discovery concerned the heart. The medical consensus of the time, backed by religious doctrine, believed the heart was a furnace that heated the blood. Leonardo, through his dissections and his knowledge of hydrodynamics, realized the heart was a muscle, a pump. He built a glass model of the aortic valve and pumped water with grass seeds through it to observe the flow. He discovered that the blood formed vortices, little whirlpools that helped close the valve. He sketched these vortices in his notebook. He described the systolic and diastolic phases. He was right. In fact, he was so right that modern cardiology only confirmed his specific theory about these blood vortices in 2014 using MRI technology. Leonardo had seen with his naked eye what took modern science 500 years and supercomputers to confirm.
Yet he never published a single page. He knew the fate of those who challenged the status quo. In the decades to come, Giordano Bruno would be burned at the stake for suggesting the universe was infinite. Galileo would be placed under house arrest for saying the earth moved around the sun. Leonardo, with his proofs that the human body was a machine and not just a mystical vessel, walked a razor's edge. He locked his discoveries away in his mirror world. The paradox of Leonardo's notebooks is that while they contained the secrets of life, they also contained the machinery of death. This is one of the most confusing aspects of his psyche. Leonardo was a man who loved nature. He was a vegetarian, a rarity for his time. There are accounts of him walking through the markets of Florence, buying caged birds just to open the doors and set them free, restoring their lost liberty. He wrote about the cruelty of man, calling humanity the king of beasts because of how we slaughter other creatures. And yet, turn the page of his notebook, and you find designs for weapons of mass destruction.
There are sketches of a giant crossbow, massive enough to hurl boulders. There are designs for a scythed chariot, a horse-drawn cart with spinning blades designed to sever the legs of enemy soldiers. There is a design for a steam-powered cannon and, most famously, the armored fighting vehicle, the precursor to the modern tank. Why would a vegetarian pacifist design a tank? The answer lies in the harsh reality of the Renaissance. Italy was not a unified country. It was a collection of city-states constantly at war. Artists needed patrons, and patrons were warlords. In 1482, Leonardo wrote a letter to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. It is perhaps the most famous job application in history. In 10 paragraphs, he lists his skills. He does not start by saying, "I painted the Annunciation." He starts by saying, "I have plans for bridges. I have plans for mortars. I can make covered chariots safe and unassailable." Only in the very last paragraph, almost as an afterthought, does he mention, "Also, I can paint."
Leonardo was selling himself as a military engineer to survive. He needed the Duke's money to fund his true passion, his scientific curiosity. His design for the tank, however, contains a mystery that suggests his heart wasn't truly in the slaughter. The design depicts a turtle-like shell reinforced with metal, capable of moving in any direction and firing cannons from all sides. It was terrifying. But if you look closely at the schematics in the notebook, there is a glaring error. The gears are arranged in such a way that the front and rear wheels would rotate in opposite directions. If built exactly as drawn, the tank would tear itself apart. It would never move.
Was this a mistake? Leonardo da Vinci, the man who understood the intricate gearing of clocks and the flow of water, making a simple gear error? Many historians believe it was intentional. It was a failsafe, a sabotage embedded in the blueprint. He designed the machine to secure the patronage, but he broke the machine to save his conscience. He hid the key to its function in his mind, ensuring that if his notebook was stolen by a madman, the weapon would remain useless. Even in his designs for war, he was playing a game of secrets. While his war machines were theoretical, his obsession with flight was spiritual. For decades, Leonardo looked up. He filled entire journals, like the Codex on the Flight of Birds, with calculations on lift, drag, and gravity. He realized centuries before Newton that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, using it to explain how a bird pushes against the air to rise. He designed the aerial screw, a helix made of linen and starch that is the direct ancestor of the helicopter. He designed gliders with retractable wings. He even designed a parachute. His sketch shows a pyramid-shaped tent made of linen, with a note, "If a man have a tent made of linen of which the apertures have all been stopped up, and it be 12 braccia across and 12 in depth, he will be able to throw himself down from any great height without suffering any injury." For 500 years, people scoffed. They said the pyramid shape was wrong, that it was too heavy, that the frame would kill the jumper. It remained just another crazy idea in the forbidden notebook. Until June 2000, a British daredevil named Adrian Nicholas decided to put Leonardo to the test. He built the parachute exactly according to the notebook's specifications, using only materials available in the 15th century: wood, canvas, and hemp rope. No synthetic fabrics, no modern safety clips. He took the device up in a hot air balloon to 10,000 feet over South Africa, and he jumped. The experts had predicted the heavy wooden frame would spin out of control. They were wrong. The descent was flawless. It was smoother and more stable than a modern parachute. As Nicholas floated gently to the earth, hanging from a design sketched in 1485, he proved that Leonardo wasn't drawing fantasies, he was drawing the future. The technology worked. The only thing missing in the 15th century was an engine to get it up there. This pattern repeats throughout the notebooks. In 1502, working for the ruthless Cesare Borgia, Leonardo created a map of the city of Imola. At the time, maps were artistic interpretations, showing buildings in elevation, useless for military strategy. Leonardo invented his own surveying tools to measure angles and distances. He created an iconographic map, a flat, overhead plan view. If you overlay Leonardo's map of Imola with a modern Google Earth satellite image, they are nearly identical. He had created a satellite view 450 years before the first satellite was launched. He designed a diving suit made of leather with cane breathing tubes and a bell to float on the surface, allowing soldiers to walk underwater and sabotage enemy ships. He designed a self-propelled cart that is essentially the first robot. He was living in a different timeline, dragging the 15th century kicking and screaming into the modern era, but only within the confines of his leather bindings. So why didn't these notebooks change the world then? Why did we have to wait for centuries to reinvent the parachute, the tank, and the medical textbook? The tragedy lies in Leonardo's own nature and the chaotic aftermath of his death. Leonardo was the master of procrastination. He was easily distracted. The man who could conceptualize a helicopter could barely finish a painting. He worked on the Mona Lisa for 16 years and still carried it with him, refining the glazes until the day he died. He would start a project, get bored or hit a snag, and move to the next thing that sparked his curiosity. In his final years, living in France as a guest of King Francis I, a stroke had weakened his right hand. He was tired. On a page of his notebook, amidst a series of complex geometrical theorems, the writing abruptly trails off. He scribbles a sudden, mundane sentence, etc., because the soup is getting cold. It is a heartbreaking glimpse into the reality of the genius. The mind was still soaring through geometry, but the body was old and dinner was ready. The soup was getting cold. The work would never be finished.
When Leonardo died on May 2, 1519, he left his precious notebooks to his faithful companion, Francesco Melzi. Melzi treasured them, but he didn't know how to organize the chaos of Leonardo's mind. A page might contain a sketch of a horse's leg next to a calculation for a water pump beside a grocery list. After Melzi died, the collection fell into the hands of Pompeo Leone, a sculptor who saw the notebooks not as scientific treatises, but as art objects to be sold. Leone did something unforgivable. He cut the pages apart. He separated the artistic drawings from the technical ones, trying to organize them to sell to collectors. He destroyed the original order. Thousands of pages were lost, used as kindling, or sold for scraps. What remained was scattered across Europe, hidden in private libraries, locked in royal vaults, forgotten in attics. The code of Leonardo da Vinci wasn't a mystical secret. It was a jigsaw puzzle scattered by greed and negligence. This is the butterfly effect of the Renaissance. Imagine if Melzi had published the anatomical drawings in 1520. Medical science would have advanced by centuries. Doctors would have understood the circulation of blood before Harvey. They would have understood the function of organs. How many millions of lives could have been saved? Imagine if the designs for steam power and mechanics had been shared. The Industrial Revolution might have sparked in the 1600s. We might have achieved flight in the 18th century.
Leonardo da Vinci changed the world with his art, yes. The Mona Lisa and the Last Supper shaped Western culture, but his forbidden notebooks represent a different kind of legacy, a legacy of what could have been. He changed the world by showing us the limits of one man's capacity to move history alone. He proved that a genius in isolation is like a seed in a jar. Without the soil of publication and collaboration, it cannot grow a forest. Today, we look at Leonardo da Vinci and we see a wizard. We see a man who could do everything. But the true lesson of the forbidden notebooks is not about talent. It is about a way of seeing. Leonardo had a motto, saper vedere, knowing how to see.
He didn't have a telescope to see the craters on the moon, though he predicted them. He didn't have a microscope to see the vortices in the blood. He didn't have an engine to test his wings. He had only his eyes and an insatiable, almost pathological curiosity. He forced himself to see what others ignored. He looked at the ugly, the dead, the dangerous, and the forbidden, and he found beauty and logic in all of it. The notebooks are a testament to a mind that refused to be fenced in by the dogma of its time. They are a reminder that the future is often hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to write it down, even if they have to write it backwards.
Leonardo da Vinci was a man who woke up while the rest of the world was still sleeping. He walked through the dark, lighting matches in the form of ideas, and although the wind of history blew many of them out before they could ignite a fire, the scorched pages that remain are enough to light the way for us 500 years later. He teaches us that the greatest forbidden act is not dissecting a body or questioning the church. The greatest forbidden act is to stop asking why. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment and tell me what made you think the most. And don't miss the next videos.